Businesses are increasingly focusing on developing engineering research and development products that can resonate with the digital consumer. How do you see the current evolution of this market in India? What are the major factors driving its growth?
To start with, of course, when you look at mobility as a space, the domain is transforming in a much faster pace. And in line with the trend of pace, of course, the personalization, automated, connected, and electrified. Each one of these are growing and cross-domain topics as well. On this context, there is, which means basically we are going more and more into digitization and software-defined vehicle. The R&D content is increasing, and that's the reason why ER&D is growing at a much faster pace. More than, it's like more than a double-digit growth year on year. And this is fueling not just the development at the OEM side, but also the tier one and different, the service providers are growing along with the growth that's happening on the mobility space. The R&D itself, when you talk about in India, since if you take BJSW as an example, the amount of engineering in terms of software that goes into each product due to this space, trend is we are developing more and more software on one side for each one of the controllers, and a lot of AI algorithm that goes into many of these products. And the other part is, after COVID, it was clear that the world has really become flat. That means the development can happen anywhere in the world. For example, in BJSW, with 25,000 associates almost working from their homes, we had almost 25,000 offices active, which means the location itself is no longer the constraint. The constraint is the availability of the talent to develop the right solutions. So this is fueling further movement of development activities in the ER&D space into locations, whether it is India or Vietnam or Mexico, wherever. I think, and this speed at which this shift is happening has gone up significantly in the last 2 years, I would say.
How is your company designing, developing, and executing IoT ecosystems?
Basically, you would have seen as a company, Bosch, earlier we were more known for manufacturing and delivering of products, but we are transformed more like a IoT company. A lot of IoT stuff, because every unit is getting connected and brings much more value to the products that we develop. With connectivity happening and AI algorithm that's being used in each one of the products to give much more user experience of the users of these systems on the vehicles is where we are working on. Of course, this brings extremely, different speed at which we are developing now, and ability to deliver these solutions onto the road. So what we are talking about is, it's not that we have 3-4 years of planning, where we normally used to take for every generation of a vehicle or a subsystem, and then release the hardware into the plant, and then it comes onto the road. But now we are talking about, in this AIoT space, that the hardware has much more computing power as well as the storage capacity. And the software itself will be then upgraded as time goes. So the platform, vehicle as a platform in terms of hardware is then available. And then we are able to develop the software which can be upgraded in the field. And that's a big change that's happening, which means we are having a loop of the hardware change that's happening is not necessarily synchronous with the software update that happens. It's possible now that we can have updates and also need-based functions that can be released onto the road. And that is where the OEMs are moving towards. And also some of the development that's happening at Bosch, for example, is to enhance the computing power. More and more high computing platforms are coming up, the so-called HPCs, as well as VCUs. And these are available in every area, whether you call it the what do you call automated driving or driver assistance related topics, or whether it is electrified systems, or whether it's cockpit electronics. Each one of them have high computing platforms available, and then the software that is developed can be updated or upgraded onto the road. If you see the recent vehicle launch, for example, also from, I mean, just to quote as an example, the XUV 700, the cockpit electronics itself would be has from the hardware point of view stable, but then the software itself, which we orchestrate from BGSW, we are able to release a lot of new apps onto this platform, and the users can then download these new applications and then get the features that they would like to have on the vehicle. This example shows that this is the trend that's going to happen, and this is, I'm talking about only one part of the system, right? I mean, you were talking about cockpit electronics, where you're talking about connectivity and all the features that come, but same applies to even other features, the driver assistance features, where when you buy a car, maybe you have basic driver assistant features, but then you can upgrade it as the years go by to enable or activate new features. So this becomes a mandate now, or prerequisite. So when somebody buys a car, it's not that at the end of it, you will keep enjoying new features as the years go by, and that means a lot of more engineering, even on a vehicle which is already released onto the road.
With product development cycles being compressed, how challenging has it become to incorporate customization approaches in engineering research and development?
The speed at which the deployment of systems has significantly gone up, and we have of course moved away from the typical waterfall model, where you used to do a clear planning right from beginning till end, and then every step by step in between. Now we have moved towards safe development. That means I mean staged and the agile development. In this safe type of development cycle, fundamentally what we are looking for is to develop. I mean, the way the development happens is concurrent to deploying them onto the customers. For example, if the OEM is doing a monthly build or a monthly update of a system, then we typically release software to the OEMs on a weekly basis. And if you have to release a software which is fully tested automatically on a weekly basis, then you need to daily do a night build or whatever. So this has become a standard now, and we have changed our tool chain in such a way that this is feasible, and also the teams can work from multiple locations while delivering on a weekly basis. So this, I would say, had already started even before the pandemic. But I think once pandemic happened, it further accelerated. While each individual may sit anywhere in the world and develop a particular part of it, but somehow this has to be integrated into the larger picture of the whole product that gets released. But with this weekly release that happens in most projects now, it is possible that a lot of automation had to be introduced, because you need to, at the end, if you want to release on a weekly basis, obviously we need to do testing, and this testing cannot be done manually. So you need to automate the complete integration testing, and this happens at the end of the build and gets released. What changed during pandemic was the need for accessing these labs remotely, and we have a project called Remoted, for example, which enabled all the labs for remote access. And this remote access enables now not that every engineer, because ER&D is slightly different from IT. In IT, it was well known that you can develop sitting anywhere in the world, and you can also develop this on the servers that can integrate and deliver the solutions. Whereas in ER&D, since it's prerequisite to test it on the target system, while we do a lot of simulation and virtual testing, but you need to develop, test on the actual hardware at the end of it before releasing onto the road. This testing always needed people to sit in front of the machines or the labs, which is normally we call it as HIL, hardware in loop testing. These hills are what I'm referring to when we talked about this remoted project, which are now remotely accessible. And once the hills were remotely accessible, One side, it enables people to work from home or work in hybrid mode, and the other side, these labs are accessible worldwide. So this is a excellent situation, because since we have teams, not just in India but also Vietnam, Mexico, Germany, and Japan, etc. Now the teams can access the same lab, I mean, wherever it is, through the remote access, and then test it. So the need for transferring the hardware samples across the world, and also losing time on logistics and setting up of labs in every location, significantly comes down. So this is a new trend which has come up now, which means now we can truly go to multiple locations in terms of our offices. That's the reason why we opened office now in Pune and Hyderabad, to go where the talent is available. So the talent availability becomes a primary factor, and not the infrastructure itself. The infrastructure can be accessed remotely as well. So this has changed our way the ER&D is happening now. So ER&D has moved more and more towards where the talent is available, and I think this is an excellent opportunity for people then to work wherever they are, but able to add value towards the development.
What is the maturity level of the automotive sector with regard to electric mobility? What kind of engineering research and development excellence would automotive manufacturers require in their transition to e-mobility?
The e-mobility is something which everybody is talking about. How I see is we will continue to have multiple modes of powertrain. I mean, be it gasoline, diesel, or CNG, hydrogen, both hydrogen engine as well as hydrogen fuel cell, and coming finally to the battery electric vehicle. In between, of course, we have hybrids. So this combination, or the decision to use different levels of electrification, depends on the vehicle segment, obviously. For two-wheeler, three-wheeler, and even passenger car, I think it will move heavily towards battery electric vehicles, while we'll continue to have the challenge of the range anxiety on the vehicles. But I think a lot of development is happening to make the vehicles much more efficient. And when you talk about more of this born electric vehicles, which are having weight body designs, as well as the rest of the design concepts in the vehicle, which is, of course, has to happen parallel to the existing platforms, which means the born electric gives opportunity to design from vehicle towards subsystems which are optimized for electrified vehicle on one side. Second aspect is, when you talk about electrified, a lot of technology changes are happening on the battery, because that is where the major development will be, to improve the storage capacity, and also to reduce the cost of these batteries. Because right now, we are almost at a tipping point where we can move towards electric vehicles from overall cost perspective, as well as the total cost of ownership. Total cost of ownership point of view, I think we already are in a pretty good shape now. So the battery development is another major area where a lot of R&D is happening. The third aspect is with respect to the motor design and development that's happening there. While it started with permanent magnet motors, now we are moving more and more towards non-permanent magnet motors, obviously due to the material availability challenge as well as cost. And this would also mean a lot of re-engineering that's needed, or new development on the motor technologies, and as well as the different concepts of electronics, power electronics. Earlier, we talked about when we said high voltage, it was typically 400 volts. Now we are talking about 800 volts, simply because of the energy, higher power that's needed on these vehicles. So once we increase the voltage, obviously it means we will have to handle lesser currents. But it means then you need electronics which are able to handle up to 800 volts on these vehicles. So this R&D is what is currently ongoing. And the other aspect, what I mentioned, with multiple technologies within electrification, For example, fuel cell would obviously be another option for heavy duty vehicles. In fact, Bosch has got, I think, maximum number of fuel cell vehicles running around for commercial vehicles, both in China and North America. This is something which we will also, focus on to bring to other markets. We do a lot of engineering already from India in the ER&D space. But the fact is, these have to be affordable when it comes to different, regions. So a lot of work is today happening to make these systems smaller, the fuel cell systems, power pack, as well as affordable. And I think that is one more area where a lot of engineering or development is happening at Bosch.
Where do you see the engineering research and development market in the near future? How is it going to transform further? Which new technologies is it going to adopt in order to drive innovation?
Fundamentally, it is clear. I mean, we are all talking about digital technologies coming, and changing the way development is happening. Both digital technologies or AIoT being used in the product itself, under pace, like I mentioned, as well as a part of the development cycle itself. So both these, the digital trend is what we see. On one side, with higher computing power and possibility to use AI in some of the products. For example, when you talk about automated driving, a lot of perception, whether it is video or radar, and then decision making, and moving more and more higher levels of automation would mean the amount of development, like I mentioned, will continuously increase. On the other side, what's happening is even the so-called classic domains, even if you take IC or braking technologies or steering, each one of them are introducing AI in their product, whether for prognosis or whether to improve the product offering itself in terms of features. And since that also is growing, so when we talk about AIoT, it's finally about innovating the product to be having feature rich as well as cost efficient for different markets. And with this combination, I only see that the development or ER&D will grow significantly, especially in India, and add value or innovate for the globe. It's no longer just frugal engineering, which we used to do earlier for India market, but ER&D would, in addition to frugal engineering for specific product segment or market segment, would be innovating for the globe. And this is something which we already see at Bosch, and I'm sure it's happening across the industry or ER&D in India. So I think it's a time to be in this market